40,000 community members have chosen empathy at a time where everywhere in this hiring market, they are being discouraged, they are being disempowered, they're being disrespected. And I am just so grateful that 40,000 community members on the candidates or employer side have identified that empowerment and empathy is the pathway forward, because it is. For this episode of How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace, I really want to zero in on the weight of that, because a lot of people are looking for connection, validation, and support at a time where the corporate space feels further apart than ever from humanity. And we have learned that, right, with the whole Duolingo thing and them announcing that they're an AI first company. Like, people are feeling like the humanity is slowly slipping away, and the candidate process is a big example of that. So for this episode, we're going to get into it and celebrate empowerment in a time where we all need it most. Hi, my name is Beverly, and this is How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace, the podcast. Okay, y'all. So this is a little different than some of my other episodes because I want to just take a moment to reflect, because that's really what this podcast is about. It's about reflecting together on how we can give more of a damn about our workplaces. A couple days ago, I celebrated 40,000 community members on TikTok, and if you are one of them, thank you. I'm so deeply appreciative of how quickly we've grown and the way in which we've grown, because people are finding community that is centered on empowering each other. One of the most humbling things about my platform is when people are in the comments hyping each other up, or, hey, I'm just coming back to share that, I didn't get this interview this time, but I got another interview. And then people are commenting, you've got this. Yeah, you too. Let's do this. It is so positive. And then when somebody comes back and says, guys, I got the interview, and everyone's cheering them up. I mean, we were on live a couple of days ago, and people were celebrating each other. Guys, I got an interview. I got a phone call. I got a screen. Or, hey, I got that promotion. Or, hey, I'm going to be a director. Or, hey, I'm doing this. People are celebrating each other. And how does this tie into giving a damn about your workplace? Well, let's talk about the current state of a lot of companies right now. I feel like there was a swing in which there was this emphasis on, okay, people want culture. They want, they want to feel included. They want to feel supported at their organization. So let's throw the pizza parties. And those seem to work because people like having free food at the office. Once a month, we're going to do a happy hour. People like that. And then we're going to take them bowling sometimes. And these Band-Aid solutions, at the time, they didn't feel like Band-Aid solutions, I'm sure. I think that for a lot of leaders, if your team is happy because they've gotten some freebies, and maybe you gave out a gift card or two at a meeting, or you gave out some awards, whatever it is that your team has done, what I have found is that people want to feel validated. Company experience, from leaders as high as C-suite all the way to the candidates coming in the door. Everyone wants to feel a sense of validation. In my experience, when you are hurt in the candidate experience or the employer experience, that hurt compounds. If you feel like you have not gotten the support that you need, and you haven't gotten the empowerment that you felt you deserved in whatever context, no matter who you are, that hurt carries with you no matter what organization you're at. If you don't have somebody at that next organization validating your experience, proactively supporting you, proactively recognizing you, and vice versa, that hurt is just going to continue to compound and spill out. And how many of us have worked with employees who just, no matter what good things happened to them at work, nothing was ever good enough. Like, they were always grumpy at work, always angry, always a problem because they were either negative or disrespectful. A lot of us have worked with those employees. Some people may just be unkind folks, but I am inclined to believe, and I have built a platform for the last 10 years, that more often than not, folks are humans who have been invalidated consistently. This episode is about the power of validation in the workplace, because 40,000 people have communicated to me that they finally feel validated for their experience, that they're getting tips that aren't gatekept, that they're being provided support from a place of respect. On the employer side, I can't tell you how many leaders I have worked with who are carrying the pains of the leaders and companies of their past with them every day. They're carrying the pains of invalidation, the lack of promotion, the rejection, the team members who made them feel like crap, the lack of infrastructure set them up for failure. Because we tell leaders a lot, in my experience, to buck up and take it for the team. If your team fails, it's a reflection of you. Leaders are often disempowered to say, well, actually, I wasn't set up for success when I first got here. So how is it my fault? But we're not allowed to say those things. And so after a while, if you've had enough, you'll go to that next place, that next space, but then you're carrying that with you into that next space. And the team that you're interacting with is feeling that. And the cycle continues. So how do we validate? How do we validate in a world that I think feels invalidated constantly? I think the first way to do a better job as a community of validating each other in the workspace is acknowledging the distinct needs of your team as they are individually. And what I mean by that is both whether you're an employee or an employer, if you are celebrating someone, ask yourself, did you ask that employee how they like to be celebrated? Before you buy the cake or before you buy the whatever it is, have you asked them? One way I used to do this is if we were celebrating a birthday or a promotion, I would typically ask my employees, okay, you get to pick the team lunch this week. How crazy is that if you are like, okay, we're going to celebrate your birthday this week, and then you pick something that you're allergic to, that they're allergic to? That has happened to me in my career where I was supposed to be celebrated and I couldn't eat what they ordered. You don't say anything. You might try to scrape around what you can, but you remember those things. So ask yourself, whether it's your coworker who's sitting next to you and you're like, oh, I want to do something nice for them. They just had a baby shower, and so we want to throw one here, or they're about to get married, or maybe they got a promotion or whatever it is. Or you're a leader who wants to recognize your team. Did you ask them how they like to be recognized? That is the first phase to me of validating that you see your teams as humans, because you're acknowledging that you all experience things differently and that it is okay. Because I've had employees who have told me very directly, Beverly, I do not want my birthday celebrated. Like, I do not want that attention on me. And I'm so glad that they did that, because I'm a raging extrovert. I love celebrating people. So I might have already had the balloons and confetti cannons ready to go. But because they felt that trust within me and said, hey, real quick, as my birthday gets closer, I want you to know, like, I don't really like this thing. I was now empowered to validate that by not doing anything, because they were like, I don't want any attention on it. Versus I've had an employee in the past who the way that they like to be recognized is through words of affirmation. Okay, so let me make sure that I am being conscientious of letting them know when they're doing a good job and not being quiet about that. Have you had an experience in your career where you have advocated for your needs and were invalidated for them? I remember one time I had a senior leader who I was communicating to, like, hey, this is how I like to be led. I've actually had this conversation many times in my career, and unfortunately only very few times, and it was earlier in my career, did I feel like the leader through and through, like, lived. Otherwise, it felt like touch and go, or more often than not at all. Early on, I would say, this is how I like to be recognized. I'll never forget, I had a leader who was like, hey, that's really great, but that's like kind of not my thing. And I was like, what do you mean it's not your thing? And they were like, well, it's just not my thing. Of course, I'm going to recognize you, but we celebrate you the way we celebrate everybody. What do you mean it's not your thing? You're a leader. You're leading people. People are different. What's funny is I remembered that and the other times that has happened to me, because it just stung. I'm coming to you saying this is how I like to be seen, and you're telling me, yeah, I don't want to see you. That's what I hear. And that's what employees and employers hear. Validate first by asking questions. Ask, how do you like to be seen? Whether you're asking somebody at lunch or in a formal one-on-one, you'll be surprised at the response you get if you act on that consistently, which is my second part, consistency. You're going to see a change in demeanor. Consistency is key, y'all. We spend so much of our lives at these companies. working alongside people who are not family. However, it is very close because you're spending deep, deep time, late hours, late nights. That consistency in showing up for yourself and for your team is how you build validation at work. It's not a one-off thing when things are feeling great. In fact, it's when things are not going so great, when the company is maybe at risk or a department's at risk, that's where you really buckle into validation so that people know they're seen and that value is not conditional. A lot of folks, given the consistency of layoffs, restructurings, all of the things in between, feel as though they're not valuable. And that lack of acknowledgement furthers the divide between employees and employers because listen, y'all, there's so many leaders who feel the same way. They feel like they are one F up away, one client churn away, one failed PR, one failed patient experience, one failed credit card sale, whatever it is, away from being cast out. However, leaders are not empowered to communicate that because it's called managing down. It's like you can't complain down or share down that but is it managing down? Because when I was in my trainings as a leader scaling up, you were always talked about managing up and managing down. Managing up is whenever you have, the ability to positively forward your thought process towards solutions. Usually to a senior leader, you're not managing down by, being negative, telling your team, this is crap, the whole kit and caboodle. And a lot of times in trainings I've been a part of, that managing down component would be conflated with also like, don't complain to your employees about your experience or this or that. And I agree to that to an extent. However, what I think that's done too is, well, if you can't share with your teams that you are struggling with something or that you're navigating something, but boundaries aside, then they don't know that it's okay because they're modeling their behavior in that shared space off of what leadership defines as acceptable. And if leaders don't have the emotional intelligence to recognize like, oh, I'm really struggling in my environment. Do you want an office environment where everyone's talking about how they're struggling all the time? No. And that seems to really freak a lot of leaders out. Like we can't ever tell people or communicate with each other that we're not doing great. Don't do that because then it's just going to be negative and people are constantly, no. Because you do that at home. Hey, I'm not feeling well today. Or, hey, you know what? Today kind of sucked. That doesn't mean that every day is going to suck. But if only employees can I have candidates on the brain right now because I'm thinking a lot about the millions of people who are navigating the hiring market as it is right now and are part of my 40,000 community members. And they feel like they can't share, whether they're in job transition or recently laid off. They fear they can't say that it sucks for fear of how will it be perceived? Will it ruin opportunities for future jobs? There's a lot of siloing. When I think about creating more validation in the workspace, I think about de-siloing, the importance and power of de-siloing, because it validates that we're all human. We're all figuring it out. We're all trying. However, in order to de-silo, which is the fourth element, I think, is vulnerability. And that's a big word in corporate. It's not something that is typically appreciated. Vulnerability means there's a weakness, right? That's usually how I've been taught. Can't show vulnerability to your teams. That means you're weak. It means that you're letting the boundaries down too much, or you're sharing too much, or you're this or you're that. Can't be vulnerable. However, there is such a thing, I believe, in tactical vulnerability, where you're being considerate of your team's boundaries without creating a space of inhumanity. An example of this is when I have had events, whether it be deaths in the family or serious scenarios on one end, or even really happy scenarios on the other end. Communicating those things to the team was critical to me because I did not want them to think that on the extremer side of, death in the family, that my interactions with them, if I was off my baseline, had anything to do with them. How many of us overthink? I overthink sometimes. I'm like, oh man, they're reacting to me a little differently than they were usually. Like, I don't overthink from the sense of I believe it's always me, but when I was a younger leader earlier in my career, I used to be like, oh my gosh, did I mess something up? Did I do something? So I tell my team so that they first don't internalize that. And then I also tell them so they know, hey, you can't help but bring your life to work. And it's okay as long as it doesn't get in the way of the work, because that is when it becomes an infrastructural problem. If everybody's negative or sad or upset, well, then yeah, that can be difficult. However, if you say to your team, hey, y'all, I'm going to answer calls today, but it's not going to be cute. I'm going to do what I can. That doesn't mean that you're a poor performer that day. It just means that you're performing differently. However, so many leaders have never been given that grace. They were forced to show up when somebody passed away because they didn't have a choice. They were forced to show up when their dog died, or their grandparent was across the country and they had to be on a Zoom call outside the hospital. There's so many stories. And you make those decisions and they're never validated. If you're lucky, you get a card. However, for so many people that I have worked alongside in my experience and been along, many people never get validation. They never get, hey, it was really crappy that we made you answer a Zoom call while your grandfather was dying in the other room. Or it was really terrible that we made you answer Slack messages on the way to your baby shower. These scenarios happen every day, and people don't historically take that time because that time wasn't given to them. You're a leader, suck it up. And it stays with you. I remember being on call once when I was in graduate school, arguably the busiest and most packed day of the year for campus. My phone was ringing a lot as an on-duty, on-call student affairs professional. I remember being so burnt out. I was so exhausted, and I felt like I couldn't tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle this. It was my first year of grad school, but I was really struggling because I hadn't slept. I was clearly deteriorating and not feeling great. I'll never forget going into my supervisor's office to fill out a report because a parent had thrown a can of beer at my head. And I'm writing this report out, and I'll never forget my supervisor saying, hey, do you need me to hold the phone for a couple of hours so that you can get some sleep? I looked at her and I burst into tears because I hadn't said I was tired. I hadn't said anything. I was purposefully trying to mask as much as possible so that they had confidence that I was able to be on call. This was in the afternoon too, so I knew it was going to get even busier. When she saw me and then took that extra step of validating what she saw, acknowledging it, I burst into tears and I said, you'd really do that. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to cry. I'm just so exhausted. It was my first time with a big on call. She was like, Beverly, finish the report, give me the phone, and get some sleep. And that's an example to me of how seamlessly just validating what you're seeing, validating people. It makes a huge difference because I got some sleep, took a shower, I felt amazing. So that when it came time for me to do my night work, I was ready to go. I felt supercharged. But most importantly, I felt validated and empowered by that acknowledgement. The vulnerability I was able to share with my leader confirmed for her, she had created a safe space of vulnerability for us. And the same thing goes for leaders listening to this. In order to break down those silos, you have to have a space of vulnerability that is available to your team. Many people are uncomfortable with vulnerability in their personal lives, so they may hear this and go like, yeah, that's... However, I hope that this podcast episode invites you to listen to that. Because something that I've been reflecting on as I've thought about how my platform continues to grow and our community continues to grow is how it's growing because people are being seen by this work and supported by others who are seeing them. And the power of that is that we're creating office spaces, businesses, company environments that are rooted infrastructurally in acknowledgement and vulnerability and consistent support that's authentic to each person's needs naturally. It's not a pizza party. It's not a new ENPS strategy. It's not a new execution. It's just plain and simple acknowledgement, attunement, and the ability to say, it's okay to be a human. It's okay to have an off day. It's okay to not be having a great experience with this client. I mean, my goodness, tell me in the comments or message me if you yourself have had an experience with an absolutely terrible client or customer or a terrible patient or a terrible whomever, and you felt like you couldn't tell anyone at work about it. Or if you could, you couldn't tell them how it really made you feel because you weren't sure if they would tell somebody else. It's happening, and it happens everywhere. One thing that I hope that in this episode gets across to those listening is that you are seen. Your experience is powerful. Those sacrifices that you made, if no one else has told you, I am so sorry that you had to make the sacrifices that you did to feel like you were going to keep your role or keep your leadership title. I'm sorry that you had to choose between going to your mom's funeral and rushing back to get back to work. I'm sorry that you got to watch your dog die the night before, like I did, and had to go back to work and struggle to keep everything. I'm sorry deeply that you were put in a position where your kid is homesick and you're a one-person caregiver and you had to choose between sending your kid to being sick with a neighbor or sick with a family member because you couldn't take care of them yourself because you had to choose to go to work, otherwise you were going to lose your job because they were going to penalize you for being late. I mean, I'm so sorry to any employer, employee, person whose sacrifices have never been properly validated. My hope for you is that you find community here, that you continue to think about the ways in which you can give more of a damn, not only for yourself, not only for your coworkers, not only for your leaders, or if you're a leader, the other way around for your teams, but that you can give a damn for the future of work, the future of the corporate environment, the company environment. Because 40,000 community members and growing, that's just on TikTok, I have community members stating that now is the time for us to enter a new era of humanity in work, because it is incredibly scalable. The data supports it. That if you have team members that are seen, that feel validated, that feel heard, that feel supported, that feel appreciated, they will work harder, they will work smarter, they will have more endurance, they will stay longer because they know that they are appreciated holistically and genuinely. If you've never had that experience, be that difference. Tomorrow, go to work, see your team, because the more people that are seeing each other like they are here on this platform, the more we can make things better for everyone. I'm very grateful to this community because I have always felt it is critical that we keep humanity at work. Many times in my career, I have been told that that is the first thing I've got to chuck if I want to be a senior leader or a business owner. The first thing you got to chuck is how much you care for your team. You care. The amount of times in my career I've heard you care too much about your teams. Why do you care so much about that? Why did you do that? Why do you care so much? Why are you telling them that? Has there been times where perhaps I maybe was a little too vulnerable? I would much rather my team see me be more vulnerable, more human, and then claw that back and reestablish a boundary than ever have team members, as I continue to grow as a leader, feel like they can't be human at all. So this is a more reflective episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening alongside with me. My hope is that tomorrow you go forward feeling empowered by someone who sees you, who wants to validate your experience, and recognizes how hard it is whether you're an employee or an employer or anywhere in between, to show up every day feeling like you can't bring what life, the universe, God, the news is bringing in with you every day. I hope that you continue to stay with us and grow with us as we craft together the new era of business, which is rooted in empathy forward operational empowerment, empathy forward validation, and community that's committed to supporting each other holistically. This was How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace. My name is Beverly, and I will see you next time. Thank you for being here.